Hi, Tim. Thank you for coming to BizTalk. That's my big pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Let's jump immediately to the topic, okay? If you can tell me a little bit about yourself, and after we move straight to the business.
Sure. My name's Tim Peara. I'm president of Bridge Therapeutics. I have, a background in finance and then small business. I 14 years on Wall Street as a financial analyst, a strategist. I then got involved with developing projects and working with entrepreneurial ventures, mostly in the energy space. I came to Bridge through a family office who had invested in my last big project overseas in Central Asia. In coming to this, I just say that I'm self-taught in several industries. I did my MBA at night school. I learned the energy business, both petroleum and cleantech, and have been with Bridge now a bit over 3 years. What attracted me to the company is the chance to do something significant. We are tackling the opioid crisis, and with something which works today. So it's pretty low risk, and because the markets are really big, the opportunity is enormous. So that's, that by way of background is myself.
I was reading, I think a couple of weeks ago, that's a big problem in US, yeah? Drug addiction.
It's a huge problem, yeah.
It's a huge problem.
And I think the social isolation during COVID has made it worse. Addiction overall is up 30% last year. Because a lot of people who, are struggling with addiction do best by seeing other people, by talking with other people.
Sure.
A lot of that was blocked, impeded by social distancing. As a consequence, overall deaths from drug overdose went up to 90,000, up 30%. And what's most relevant to Bridge is that, deaths from opioid overdose also went up 30% to almost 60,000. So the observation, however, is that the majority of people who suffer from addiction start by seeking pain relief. They're not trying to get high, but they get addicted, and then things spin out of control. So that's so that's kind of the background for what we're doing.
Let's talk a little bit more about the business.
Sure, be happy to. So hold on. So we're looking to address a key problem of the opioid crisis, namely that our best, strongest pain relievers are addictive and can cause overdose. And I went through some statistics about that. So all of the very strong pain relievers are opioids. What Bridge uses to tackle this problem is working with a drug called buprenorphine, or for simply, we can just call it BOOP. It's a mouthful. So BOOP has been proven safe and effective to treat both pain and addiction. This greatly reduces the time, cost, and risk of FDA approval. Yet because the drugs are generic, we need to have barriers to entry to protect our products. So we do this several different ways. We do this with a delivery system called Zydis, which resolves the chief drawback of this drug. This drug, if swallowed, is ineffective. It's kind of like nitroglycerin, which is given under the tongue or the inside of the cheek. In this case, current versions of this drug are given under the tongue or on the inside of the cheek. They take anywhere from 6 to 16 minutes to dissolve. Our version takes just 3 seconds, right? 3 seconds to dissolve. So following on from that, another way that we can protect our products is what's called marketing exclusivity. When we do unique trials for FDA approval, they'll grant a period of about 3 years where only the company who does the trial is able to claim to make a particular claim. Our later products are patented, and we have improved versions, which allows us to keep patient loyalty. Right, so we launch the easiest drug in the market to get approved, and later on we follow up with a better drug, which has longer protection around it. So that's kind of the strategy of what we're doing. Looking at our products, we have strong, safe pain drugs. Bup HD, LD, that's for high dose, low dose. These have a very low risk of addiction or overdose. And we have an even better pain reliever called Bucam. This treats two different types of pain. They treat both from injury as well as from inflammation. So our addiction drug is easy to take. So, here, as I described, it dissolves rapidly. It also should eliminate the mouth irritation that currently about a fifth of patients experience from the long delivery time, the 6 to 16 minutes. The another thing to point out is that using this technology, our costs are very inexpensive. We cost about 1/5 that of the branded drug. So, we have the ability then to offer steeper discounts to users or to the people who stock the shelves and decide which drugs get approved, because we have a cost advantage on the manufacturing side. If we look at our milestones, where we stand, what we've achieved, 2 years ago, we licensed this delivery technology, the Zydis technology. We opened our first file with FDA. It's called the IND, Investigation of New Drug. We did that last year. We've conducted pilot studies and expect to do the only study required for FDA approval in the third quarter. We look to file for approval in the first quarter of next year and be in sales towards the end of next year. Any of these last three events are drivers for liquidity events, such as an IPO, merging into a SPAC, doing a trade or licensing deal, the distribution deals. So these are different ways that we can bring liquidity to our shareholders. As I mentioned at the start, the markets we're looking at are big, about $36 billion. We are treating the worst pain. It's called moderate to severe. These are people typically who can't get out of bed in the morning because they're in such bad pain. Right now, the only therapies are opioids like morphine, oxycodone, hydromorphone, fentanyl. Brand names are like Lortab or Percocet. The acute pain market, or short-term market, is about $10 billion. The chronic pain market, long-term, is upwards of $20 billion. When we look at opioid addiction, we're competing directly with other versions of buprenorphine, and it's about a $6 billion market. But we're also looking to take market share away from the other main addiction drugs, which is methadone and naltrexone.
Yeah.
So we can grow that market beyond that. If we look at our go-to-market strategy, I mentioned the idea of licensing. And in licensing, we would eventually look to get an upfront fee and take a share of revenue, but let another company do the marketing for them. And we have discussions going on with several companies about that. The other approach is that we do it ourselves. And we can do that certainly with the first drug, because prescriptions for opiate addiction are highly concentrated. If you look at the map there, the dark blue shows the states which have the highest concentration of the problem, the clinics, the prescribers. So that's what those mark. And hence, like focusing on just a few states, not 50 states, but maybe 5.
Yeah.
Right? We can start a sales effort with a relatively small sales force, get a big volume of sales, and then gradually build our effort. So if we start with addiction, then by the time we have our first pain drugs out, we can cover the whole U.S. If we do this, we would be wholesalers, and we're not going to be selling to individual, patients. We would be selling to prescribers, to clinics, pharmacy benefit managers, hospital systems, etc. We would look to outsource, the actual physical distribution back office functions. We'd use a combination of dedicated and shared sales force. So like in rural areas, widely spread out, we would look to share salespeople. And as I said, fundamental to this is exploiting market concentrations. If we look at our financials, the numbers are robust. We're looking for about $20 million in sales next year, growing to about $500 million in 2025. And that's a small market share. That's just 2% market share, a tiny number. Yet we have the potential to have much, much higher revenue, anywhere from $4 to $14 billion, because the market's so big.
Yeah.
Now we can get there through what's called safer scheduling. Buprenorphine, just like codeine, is a Schedule 3. Morphine, hydromorphone, fentanyl are all Schedule 2. So they have greater risk of abuse. You can take a month's worth of buprenorphine at one time, and the worst that's going to happen is you'll get an upset stomach. Right? The risk of overdose is practically nil. By having a safer product, we can get what's called government guidance. That's where the CDC, FDA, DEA encourages prescribers to use the best available therapies. And with that, so like with Uncle Sam as our salesman, we can beat these sales numbers. We can get to these sales numbers and become the standard of care in treating pain and addiction. There are a couple of case studies or a couple of companies that we'd like to highlight as being comparable to Bridge. One is a company called Peara Therapeutics. Peara is also using branded generic drugs, or they're also using drugs that are already been proved safe and effective. They have a big market share for a couple of their drugs. They're sitting at about a $1.5 billion market cap. An even better comparison is a company called Biohaven. And I say that's better because they're actually using the same delivery system. They're using Zydus, same thing as we are. They IPO'd at $420 million and are currently valued at around 7 or 8 billion. Right? And their markets are smaller than Bridge's. Their markets are about $5 billion. We're sitting at 36. So we have the ability to beat Biohaven. If we look at the question of why Bridge and not somebody else, which is a fair question, it's a little company. It really comes down to our team, and in particular, our chief science officer. Dr. Greg Sullivan has done 170 trials for FDA approval, and he's done virtually every single trial in America of buprenorphine drugs for approval. Done 16 different trials of buprenorphine drugs. This is the first time he's doing it for his own company. Right? So he's, but he's done work for the big boys. He's done work for Pfizer. He's done work for Johnson & Johnson, etc. I myself have a business and finance background. I've been working with small companies for the last 20 years and raised them about $200 million. Our chief operating officer, Dave Bergstrom, has spent his career in pharma. And he ran the Zydus division. He ran that business for 7 years. And among our advisors, I point out Bob Rappaport ran the FDA's division for pain and addiction drugs. Joe Pergolesi has helped commercialize, many $1 billion in pharmaceutical assets. And Jason Bailey has been involved in 4 different product launches. So in terms of our investment request, what we're looking for, we're in the midst of raising a $5 million round in preferred equity. Already coming into this round, we raised, we've raised a total to date about $7.5 million. Later on, we would look to raise a further $35 million to develop a pipeline and for marketing. I've talked about different types of exits, a NASDAQ listing, going into a SPAC. Indivior is one of the industrial companies that I talked about. Indivior owns the branded drug right now. They own Suboxone. So they are a logical party to want to buy our addiction drug. And they're sitting on about $500 million, $1 billion in cash right now. Yeah. So there's a bar chart of what we look to be doing with it. But that's kind of the prepared remarks. I have other stuff in the back, but that's the quick run through on Bridge.
Thank you so much, Tim. I have a couple of questions. In terms of effectiveness, right? Pain is a very bad thing. When you wake up in the morning, there are people who really can't get up from the bed. And how effective is compared to opioid?
Let me give you an idea of what we're talking about. In terms of pain relief, opioids are strong pain relievers. Buprenorphine is a strong pain reliever. For pain relief alone, it's about as strong as fentanyl, the strongest opioid, if not stronger, for pain. But unlike fentanyl, the risk of overdosing is practically nil. Right? So fentanyl in rough numbers is about 30 times stronger than morphine and has an overdose risk of about 50 times worse than morphine. Buprenorphine is about, similar to fentanyl, but its risk of overdose is 0, according to the Centers for Disease Control. This table looks at a whole variety of metrics, a whole different ideas about, how our drugs compare to, in the first column, it's versus opioids. The second one is versus anti-inflammatory drugs or NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. That's what NSAID stands for. And then for opioid use disorder, we're comparing ourselves to methadone, which is the most popular drug. So, this is kind of how we stack up.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, in terms of fundraising, overall it's right. It's about 40-50 million up to selling in 2022.
Right. And in terms of what we looked at raise, yes.
Yeah, and what about the valuation? What do you have in mind?
We're looking at a 60 million pre-money today, 60. So, we've raised like $2.5 million on that valuation, in this round.
6 pre-money.
Yep, 60.
And do you have any commitment for now? For
we have
this
what, sorry?
million?
We have beyond the money that we've raised, beyond the $2.5 million that we've raised in this round, there's one party looking at about $1 million and another looking at about $5 million.
Okay.
We have a further group who's looking at a bridge facility for $18 billion. I'm sorry, 18 million. 18 million. Their interest would be to getting us ready to go into a SPAC. So, that's the sort of things that we have in here.
So when you want to go to a SPAC, before or after start selling?
It would likely precede selling, but a lot of biopharma companies will list or go into SPACs 3 or 4 or 5 years before they are in sales.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, many of them. I mean, also because the time to get all the permissions can be very long. Sometimes
it can. And we're looking first in the US, but then to go to Europe. And
this was my second question. I mean, second, maybe the third. How do you scale if you want to stay in? Because I mean, the regulations between US, Europe, and taking on the side UK, they are quite different.
Well, let me give you an idea of what's going on here. The work that we do in the States is designed to be acceptable for the European Medicines Agency. That is the European regulator. And, Britain uses the same regulator that all the EU countries do. They're not coming up with their own regulator. But the countries in Europe have a 2-step process.
I know.
They have, it takes about so you go through a check by the EMA, or the EMA, takes about a year, and then you need to apply individually to different countries, to the medical board of each country. I think Germany tends to be the fastest big country. England and France are about an average, and Southern European countries tend to be more like a year and a quarter, year and a half to get ability to sell in there. In other parts of the country, or other parts of the world, getting the FDA approval is a virtual, allows you to sell into Latin America. It makes it very, very easy to get approval in Saudi Arabia. With approval in Saudi Arabia, marketing to the rest of the Gulf is very straightforward. It's really, really quick and straightforward.
Yeah, that's a cascade. I mean, when you get the FDA,
yep,
things will become easier, at least for many parts of the world. I mean, I suppose also for Europe, after having the FDA, less than a year should be fine. although in Europe we are a bit more bureaucratic. And yes, we are. And I mean, that's pretty much, I think we covered almost everything.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to close, I don't know, with some message and a closing for investors and watching the video, please do it.
Well, I guess, and maybe I just point out something here, is that the delivery system that we are using is well known and it's well used. So it is a significant, although we don't own it, 9 of the 10 top pharma companies use Catalent's delivery system, this Zydis delivery system. It's like people, and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, they each tried for a couple of years to come up with their own delivery system like this. And then they ended up abandoning that, abandoning several $100 million worth of investment to use this. So, it is the best system for oral delivery, for oral absorption. Right? So when people look at this and say, you guys don't own the patent, it's true, we don't own the patent, but it's the basis for building an economic barrier around what we're doing, right? So that's foundational to everybody.
Yeah.
And then, then we add with, period exclusivity and product patents. So the later ones are product, we have patents. So, as a result, we can get the benefits of rapid review for a known drug, for buprenorphine, while, protecting them through a combination of the delivery system exclusivity and product patents later on. So kind of get the best of both worlds into big markets.
I mean, in terms of how effective can be this protection, let's name it this way, in terms of barrier for the new, incoming, company can come and be competing with you.
Well, it's expensive technology. It's difficult technology. As I said, Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson tried each for about 2 or 3 years, and they spent a few $100 million themselves to try to come up with this thing. If the world's biggest pharma companies can't come up with their own version of this, this system, it basically it's a freeze-dried gelatin. It's like gelatin, something you get in the cafeteria. Take out the flavoring, and put in the active ingredient, and then you freeze dry it. So you suck all the water out. But in addition to patents, Catalent builds their own machines. So they don't, nobody knows how to do it but the company. They build their own factories. So, it's not as though people wait for the patents to expire and then they can do it because they know what to do. The company guards this thing. They protect it. It's actually the main manufacturing site is in England. It's in Swindon, which is kind of west of Heathrow Airport. And there's a backup facility in New Jersey.
More than right. Okay, Tim, I think we substantially covered everything, and I really thank you for the time to be with me today. And again, thank you very much, and hope we can have another talk months to come.
Very good. Thank you.